Now, with all the stories making the headlines, it's the ITV Lunchtime News.
Guilty, the terrorist who killed an MP. The jury took just 18 minutes to reach its verdict on the Islamic State fanatic who murdered Sir David Amess and plotted to kill Michael Gove. We'll have full details of this story breaking this lunchtime. Also ahead. Did the Chancellor follow all the rules on his family's financial affairs? Rishi Sunak refers himself to the ethics watchdog.
It does leave one very tired and exhausted, doesn't it?
The Queen speaks for the first time about her experience of COVID. The MOD warns that Russia could use phosphorus weapons in Mariupol. And a run for Rob Burrow, a new marathon to honour the sports star living with motor neuron disease.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. In the last hour, a 26-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering the MP, Sir David Amess. Ali Harbi Ali, described as an Islamic State fanatic, was also found guilty of preparing acts of terrorism and plotting to attack other politicians, including the Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. He had told the Old Bailey trial he had no regrets about the murder in October last year, saying Sir David deserved to die as a result of voting for airstrikes on Syria. Our reporter Mark McQuillan is outside the court. The jury took just 18 minutes to reach its verdict, Mark.
Yes, this was very quick indeed, Nina. Less than half an hour for the jury to reach their verdict, finding Ali Harbi Ali guilty of the murder of MP Sir David Amess last year. And after the unanimous verdict was delivered, the judge, Mr. Justice Sweeney, thanked the jury. He said it cannot have been easy to listen to the evidence you have listened to. While Sir David's family were also in court at the Old Bailey here, sitting just metres away from Ali Harbi Ali in the dock as the verdict was read out. 26-year-old Ali attacked Sir David as he was carrying out a constituency surgery at a Methodist church in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. Now, the head of the Met Police's counter-terrorism division said that Ali Harbi Ali had acted alone and had radicalised himself prior to committing murder.
Ali Harbi Ali was a committed, self-radicalised terrorist who conducted a terrible attack against democracy here in the UK by killing Sir David Amess on this day. We know from his own admissions in interview, and we know from his behaviour in trial, that his focus was on targeting MPs within the Houses of Parliament here in the UK. So he was a committed terrorist.
Sir David Amess's murder shocked so many. He was a much-loved MP. He was a very committed public servant for many, many years. And prosecutor Tom Little QC said earlier on the evidence against Ali was utterly overwhelming and compelling as he made his closing speech here at the Old Bailey. And Ali Harbi Ali will be sentenced for the murder of Sir David Amess on Wednesday.
Mark McQuillan, thank you very much. Thank you. The Chancellor is facing new scrutiny over his own family's financial affairs. Rishi Sunak has announced he's referred himself to the Prime Minister's ethics watchdog. Labour says there's a whole list of areas where Mr Sunak appears to have failed to declare things, including his wife's sharehold in a company which was awarded government contracts. Mr Sunak says he's confident the review will show he's done nothing wrong. And in the last hour, Downing Street said the Prime Minister retains full confidence in his Chancellor. Here's our political correspondent, Libby Vino.
The Chancellor was keeping a low profile today, visiting a college in Darlington near his Yorkshire constituency. But his personal tax affairs remain very much in the spotlight. His wife, Akshata Murthy, has now said she will pay all her taxes here while keeping her non-dom status. He says he's done nothing wrong and believes an inquiry by Lord Geidt, the Prime Minister's advisor on standards, will confirm that.
Well, look, I think he's given an account of the fact that he disclosed everything in the right way and that everything's been above board. He disclosed all of his interests and family interests to the civil service in the usual way. And his own wife has given an account of her tax affairs over the weekend and made clear she's going to make some changes there. So I don't think there's a problem, but it's also right that this should be looked at by Lord Geidt, given the controversy that surrounded it.
Requesting the inquiry in a letter to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak wrote, "My overriding concern is that the public retain confidence in the answers they are given, and I believe the best way of achieving this is to ensure those answers are entirely independent, without bias or favour." It's unclear whether the inquiry will look at why the Chancellor still had a green card entitling him to work in the US until last year. Labour say he should just come clean about all the issues.
I don't think that investigation will be wide enough. I think when it comes to something as basic as this, the Chancellor should just put those answers into the public domain so everybody can see the answers to the very obvious questions that are being asked, and we have transparency and accountability.
Meanwhile, one union leader has dismissed the idea that a separate leak inquiry will find a civil servant gave out details of Mr Sunak's affairs.
The consequences are dire for a civil servant. You know, this could be a sacking offence as well as potential any kind of criminal element of it, which is why it's very unlikely. You can never say never.
But the Chancellor appears to believe that it is important to find out who briefed the media about his wife's tax affairs and that green card.
Libby, what impact could this have on the Chancellor's future in politics?
Well, I think quite a significant one. It has to be said, though, that this morning the Prime Minister's spokeswoman was briefing lobby journalists and she was asked whether Boris Johnson still had full confidence in Rishi Sunak, and she said yes, but there are still many, many questions about Mr Sunak's approach to all this, not least the fact that when it first emerged that his wife had non-dom status and didn't pay all her taxes here, he suggested that was a smear on her. She has subsequently agreed to pay all her taxes here, although she is keeping that special tax status. Equally, there is still an issue about why he held on to that green card, which allowed him to work in the US, effectively treating him as a resident of the US while he was living and working at number 11 Downing Street. I think that is still a mystery, and many of his colleagues are extremely concerned as to why he hasn't been able to come forward with a simple explanation.
All right, Libby Vina, thank you very much. Thank you. The Queen has described how COVID left her tired and exhausted after she caught the virus earlier in the year. The 95-year-old monarch tested positive in February when Buckingham Palace said she was suffering from mild cold-like symptoms. She was attending a virtual visit to the Royal London Hospital to officially open their new Queen Elizabeth unit. Our royal editor, Chris Shipp, has the details.
Welcome, or so I say welcome, to the Queen Elizabeth Critical Care Unit.
Good morning, Your Majesty.
In different times, the Queen would have attended this hospital in person.
This particular bit where you're standing, this was specially built, was it, for the...
But given the Queen's recent mobility issues, this hospital wing, which carries her name, was opened by video call. It was built in just 5 weeks.
It is very interesting, isn't it, when there's some very vital thing, how everybody works together and pulls together. Marvellous, isn't it?
Can I say a little bit of Dunkirk spirit? Was Paul?
Yeah, which is indeed. Right? Thank goodness it still exists.
And it was a moment for the Queen to chat to patients about her own contact with COVID. She tested positive in mid-February.
I'm better now.
I'm getting there. I'm recovering. I'm much better. I mean, I've recently left the wheelchair, so I'm walking about now.
I'm glad that you're getting better, and it does leave one very tired and exhausted, doesn't it? This horrible pandemic.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed.
The virtual opening is a first for the Queen, but they will be a more regular sight as her diary is adjusted. Since she marked her 70 years of reign at Sandringham in February, she's cancelled a number of events. Buckingham Palace said her mobility has been the main issue rather than the effects of COVID. She was determined to and did attend the Thanksgiving service for the Duke of Edinburgh 2 weeks ago, but she asked Prince Andrew to escort her to and from her seat at Westminster Abbey.
With no further ado, I will unveil the plaque.
This virtual opening meant it was the Lord Lieutenant of London who unveiled the plaque on the Queen's behalf. She is determined still to see and be seen, but just as we did during the lockdowns, we will now see more events when the Queen, who turns 96 later this month, joins in from Windsor Castle.
Thank you very much indeed, all of you.
Chris is here and Dr. Sarah Jarvis is also joining us. Good afternoon. Chris, if I could start with you, this is the first time we've heard from the Queen herself about her bout of COVID.
Yes, don't forget we saw her, of course, at the Prince Philip's Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago. But I think this is less about really the Queen's COVID and the fact she felt exhausted. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised by that. She's 96 years old and lots of people many, many years younger have felt exhausted from COVID. For me, this is kind of like a permanent change in the Queen's diary because of her mobility issues. Remember, she had to cancel the Commonwealth Day service back in March. She's going to be doing much more of these virtual audiences now, not because of lockdown, because that was a necessity at the time. Now it's because of her mobility issues. And that's something I think is now in the mix permanently.
OK, so a big moment then. What does that mean potentially for the Jubilee celebrations and her attendance?
Of course, it's a big moment, the Jubilee. She's had the accession day. She's passed the sort of 70-year milestone, if you like. But the Jubilee is a very big event. There's a couple of events in May and there are the big sort of long bank holiday weekend in June. Buckingham Palace are never drawn on what she will be going to for sure. They simply won't know. In fact, it's quite possible they won't know until just the days before the events themselves. But, I mean, it's a busy weekend. You know, there's those balcony moments and all the rest of it. She'll be trying to do as many as she can, but I don't think she'll be doing as many as perhaps she might have been expected to maybe, a year ago.
OK, let's bring Dr. Jarvis in now. Look, we've heard from the Queen today that she was tired and exhausted with COVID, as Chris is saying, age 95. Do we know yet, are we any closer to knowing why COVID impacts people so differently? Why, even with vaccines, some people die, others have no symptoms, others struggle with long COVID?
Well, we do know that you're very much less likely to become severely unwell if you've been vaccinated, and we do know that she has been vaccinated. But we also know that the older you are, the more likely you are to feel really unwell with it. Now, having said that, she was relatively mildly affected, but she may well have what we call long COVID. 1.7 million people in the UK, at the most recent estimates, have got it. 1.2 million have had it for more than 12 weeks. And of those, more than 2/3 say that it's affecting their day-to-day lives. The most common symptom, tiredness.
Yeah, a lot of people. On COVID in general, we've had a warning today from the NHS Confederation saying that the current COVID rates are having right now a major impact on the NHS, like winter crisis in the springtime. It wants the government to reconsider its current living with COVID plan. Do you think that's likely?
Sadly, from my experience of what the government have done so far, I think it's extremely unlikely. But I do think that we all need to bear in mind that if COVID rates continue at this rate, even though we're in a much better position than we were before we had the vaccines, we are not going to be able to make inroads onto those 6 million people on waiting lists in England alone, waiting for NHS procedures. And indeed, waiting times could go up because in some hospitals, they are now having to cancel routine procedures.
Yeah, impact on the NHS. Just briefly, what is your advice for the most vulnerable living in a country where the masks are off and people may choose now not to test anymore?
Well, I would say if you are going to see people, please ask them for your sake to test before they come. Do everything you can outside. Yes, the weather is finally warming up and that does dramatically reduce the risks. And if you are vulnerable, I'm afraid all too many of my patients have already told me I'm not going anywhere, that there are lots of people, because with infection rates of 1 in 13, 1 in 15, the chances are if I go into any room or any crowded setting, I'm going to be exposed.
Dr. Sarah Jarvis, as ever, thank you. Chris, thank you very much. Thank you. Still to come this lunchtime, the sister of the murdered teacher, Sabina Nessa, says her family would have been treated differently if they had been white. And the marathon effort to honour rugby league legend Rob Burrow. First, the Ministry of Defence has raised concerns that Russia may use phosphorus weapons in Ukraine. The warning is centred around whether they could be used in Mariupol as the fighting in the port city intensifies. When used, they cause horrific burns. Peter Smith is in the capital, Kyiv. Peter, on the war, what's the situation on the ground?
Well, what I can say is we've seen enough evidence of civilian atrocities with conventional bombs and bullets. So white phosphorus does have a kind of scary sound to it. It does also have a legitimate purpose used in warfare to create smoke for troop movements below. But it's not the weapons that are frightening Ukrainians in the east. It's the fact that today we are hearing that the 36th Marine Brigade that's been defending Mariupol for Ukraine has announced that this now is their last stand. They're running out of ammunition. They are surrounded. And they say that within the next 24 hours, they expect the city will finally fall into Russian hands. They've held out for more than 6 weeks now. They've been besieged. Food hasn't been able to come in and out of the city. And in their statement, they've said that they've resorted to sending in cooks and members of the orchestra to fight because they've simply ran out of infantrymen. And this is, of course, when we're expecting a renewed Russian assault to come in from the east. So what we are facing is surrender from Mariupol.
Moving to Moscow now, and there's a key meeting taking place today. Putin's first face-to-face meeting with an EU leader since Russia's invasion began.
That's right, the Austrian Chancellor is visiting Moscow today. Well, he will sit down with Vladimir Putin. It's the first time, as you say, that Vladimir Putin has met a European leader since the invasion began. And we know that the Austrian Chancellor has been visiting some of the sites I mentioned that where alleged civilian massacres have taken place. He was walking through Bucha. He saw for himself the evidence of these mass graves and civilians who have been allegedly bound and executed, which would be a war crime. Whether he raises that with the Russian Premier or not, we won't know for sure because no cameras are going to be allowed in. This air of Russian secrecy prevails. And if the Austrian Chancellor is hoping to appeal to Vladimir Putin's better nature for diplomacy, many here in Ukraine will tell you that Vladimir Putin is far, far beyond that.
Peter Smith, thank you. Here, the sister of the murdered teacher, Sabina Nessa, says she believes her family would have been treated differently if they had been white. Sabina's killer was jailed for life on Friday. Her sister Jabina is speaking out about the lack of attention initially given to the case. Chloe Keedy joins me now. You've spoken to Sabina's sister. What exactly did she say?
Well, I think the family's feeling a real mix of emotions since last Thursday and Friday, but one of those is definitely anger. I was in court on Thursday when Jabina read out a statement addressing her sister's killer directly, and she told me today how angry it made her that he hadn't turned up. He had refused to come to court to hear what she had to say, and she feels he shouldn't have been given a choice. She told me she feels her family's been let down by the government throughout this whole process. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, tweeted on Friday to say that she's doing everything in her power to target perpetrators and to make the streets safer for everyone. But Jabina told me today that she's still waiting for the Home Secretary to make any direct contact with her family.
She's using my sister's name, the tweet on Friday, she used my sister's name for her publicity. But really, where was she the last 7 months? It just shows that she doesn't have, she doesn't care, I feel personally. She says she's trying to tackle male violence, but then where is the support? I feel like all the talks that's happening in government are just talks and there's no action.
Well, it's not just the government that Sabina's family feels let down by. She told me she believes her sister's murder would have been treated differently by the media if she had been white.
I do have a load of newspapers for my memory's sake, for my daughter's memory, to remember her auntie. And she's been getting pages 7, pages 9, just a little section of it. And for example, Sarah Edward, she's been getting front page coverage. and it's not fair. I think every woman that a life is taken should be front page. Doesn't matter if you're white, it doesn't matter if you're black, or it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. A life has been taken.
Well, she spoke about the ordeal her family's been through over the past 7 months. She says she doesn't sleep, she feels scared to go outside, and she worries about her 2 young daughters and whether anything will have really changed by the time they grow up.
Chloe Keedy, thank you. Finally, Leeds will host a new marathon from next year to honour one of the city's sporting heroes. Rob Burrow, the rugby league legend, is living with motor neuron disease. The race will raise money to build a centre in his name to help others who are diagnosed with it. Sarah Corker was there in Leeds at the launch.
The marathon will start and finish here at Headingley Stadium, the place, of course, where Rob Burrow achieved so much during his sporting career. And there will be 7,777 runners. The number 7, important, of course, because it was Rob's squad number for Leeds Rhinos. And the event will help to raise money to build the Rob Burrow Centre for Motor Neuron Disease, a place that will support other families living with this condition. And the event was inspired by his friend and former teammate Kevin Sinfield, who himself has taken on many fundraising challenges, and he said this would be a marathon built on friendship.
We're in the process of trying to raise enough funds to get the MND Centre off the ground, which will be in his name as well. It just provides a real legacy for him. And rightly so, because what him and the family have done has been incredible, and we want that to continue forever. We want generation after generation to understand who Rob Burrow is and was, and absolutely what he stood for. And I think it's a wonderful story that shows the best of humanity.
Rob Burrow was diagnosed with motor neuron disease in 2019 after he'd retired from rugby league. And since then, alongside his family and friends, he has campaigned tirelessly to raise awareness of the condition and also to raise money for charity. This marathon in Rob's name, in a city where to many he is a hero, will help to keep motor neuron disease in the spotlight. And organisers hope that come the 14th of May 2023, thousands of people will take part in this event and raise money for many different good causes.
Sarah Corker in Leeds. Mary's here with the evening news at 6:30 from me and everyone else. For now, bye-bye.
There's a